This assembly is now ready to come to order. You may turn your hymn books to number 991. 991. This is my Father's world, and to my listening ears all nature sings, and round me rings the music of the spheres. This is my Father's world, I rest in the thought of the rocks and trees, of skies and seas, his hand his wonders wrought. This is my Father's world, the birds their carols sing, the morning light, the lily white, declared the Maker's praise. This is my Father's world, he shines in all that's fair, and the rustling grass I hear him pass, he speaks to me everywhere. This is my Father's world, oh, let me ne'er forget that though the wrong seems all so strong, God is the ruler yet. This is my Father's world, the battle is not done. Jesus is satisfied, and earth and heaven be one. Number 744. 744. We're part of the family that's been born again. We're part of the family whose love knows no end. For Jesus has saved us and made us his own. We're part of the family that's on its way home. And sometimes we laugh together, sometimes we cry, sometimes we share together heartaches and sighs. Sometimes we dream together of how it will be when we all get to heaven, God's family. And those hungry for us will all meet again just inside the city. As we enter in, there'll be no more parting. With Jesus we'll be together forever, God's family. And sometimes we laugh together, sometimes we cry, sometimes we share together heartaches and sighs. Sometimes we dream together of how it will be when we all get to heaven, God's family. Number 844. After this song, we will go to Heavenly Father in prayer. Guide me, O the great Jehovah, pilgrim through this burdened land. I am weak, but thou art mighty. Hold me with thy powerful hand. Bread of heaven, feed me till I want no more. Feed me till I want no more. Open now the crystal fountain, whence the healing streams doth flow. Let the fire and cloudy pillar lead me all my journey through. Strong deliverer, be thou still my strength and shield. Be my strength and shield. When I tread the verge of Jordan, bid my ancient fears subside. Bear me through the swelling current, land me safe on Canaan's side. Songs of praises, I will ever give to thee. I will ever give to thee. Let us pray.
Our Father in heaven, we come to you in prayer at this time, asking you for thanksgiving for all the blessings that you've given us. We pray, Father, that even in difficult times, sometimes it's difficult to be thankful, but even in sad times of our lives, we're thankful, Lord, that we know that you are going to take care of us and take care of the loved ones, and if we lose someone or they're in surgery. Father, we have a lot of people that have had surgeries, are facing surgeries, and have a lot of health issues. We ask you to be with them. Olive Clark, therapy on her foot. Be with Ronnie and Deborah as they deal with his same treatment for another year. Be with Candace now. She's experiencing pain, Lord. Be with Holly Desi. She's undergoing radiation treatments. Be with her, help her to be pain-free if possible. Be with Carol Stevens. She's doing well after her surgery, but keep her in your prayers, Lord, and that she'll continue with a good recovery. Father, we've also had some that are facing life's near end. Be with that family, Lord. Deacons, Lord, be with them as hospice has come in to help her. Father, we ask you to also be with Brian and Timmy Hood and the loss of their newborn granddaughter. Only if you've gone through that, you don't know how hard that is for you. Also be with Jay Newell, Lord, as he's lost his dad. Be with him as he gets through this troublesome time. Father, we ask you to continue to grant us your blessings as we strive to spread your word and do good deeds to promote you and what you're about. Be with the elders here. Be with our preacher Aaron and his family. Bless everyone here, Lord. And we thank you again for your bountiful blessings. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen.
You may, excuse me, mark your hymn books at number 911. 911 will be our song after the message. Some of these songs, I know some of these songs real well, and I will choose some of the songs, and I don't know, I guess it's my age. I'll mess up on some of the words, or I might even skip off onto another verse. So bear with me. Number 716. Sing to me of heaven, sing that song of peace. From the toils that bind me, it will bring release. Burdens will be lifted that are pressing so. Showers of great blessings o'er my heart will flow. Sing to me of heaven, let me fondly dream of His golden glory, of His pearly gleam. Sing to me when shadows of the evening fall. Sing to me of heaven's sweetest song of all. Sing to me of heaven as I walk alone, dreaming of the comrades that so long have gone. In a fairer region morning goes on. They are happy as they sing that old sweet song. Sing to me of heaven, let me fondly dream of His golden glory, of His pearly gleam. Sing to me when shadows of the evening fall. Sing to me of heaven's sweetest song of all. Sing to me of heaven tenderly and low, till the shadows o'er me rise and swiftly go. When my heart is weary, when the day is long, sing to me of heaven, sing that old sweet song. Sing to me of heaven, let me fondly dream of His golden glory, of His pearly gleam. Sing to me when shadows of the evening fall. Sing to me of heaven's sweetest song of all. And now for our speaker of the evening, Brother Aaron.
I wouldn't feel too bad, Brother Joe. I have messed up too on the songs. Something about our songbooks. There are different words depending on which book you have, depending on where you're sitting in the auditorium, and depending on what slides we're using. So it's completely understandable. We mess up the words. I've done it myself. I noticed that.
I was familiar with the shape notes for years.
Yeah. It's different if you I don't know what I'm doing when I sing, but it's different if you actually know what you're doing. 106th Psalm. I want to start off and just read, this is a longer psalm. I want to start off and just read the first 22 verses of Psalm 106. Give thanks to the Lord, for He is good. His love endures forever. Who can proclaim the mighty acts of the Lord or fully declare His praise? Blessed are those who act justly, who always do what is right. He saved them from the land of the foe, from the hand of the foe, from the hand of the enemy. He redeemed them. The waters covered their adversaries. Not one of them survived. Then they believed His promises and sang His praise. But they soon forgot. Notice that. We're going to focus on that phrase tonight. They soon forgot what He had done and did not wait for His plan to unfold. Remember me, Lord, when you show favor to your people. Come to my aid when you save them, that I may enjoy the prosperity of your chosen ones, that I may share in the joy of your nation and join your inheritance in giving praise. We have sinned, even as our ancestors did. We have done wrong and acted wickedly. When our ancestors were in Egypt, they gave no thought to your miracles. They did not remember your many kindnesses. And they rebelled by the sea, the Red Sea. Yet he saved them for his name's sake, to make his mighty power known. He rebuked the Red Sea and dried it up. He led them through the depths as through a desert. In the desert, they gave in to their craving. In the wilderness, they put God to the test. So he gave them what they asked for, but sent a wasting disease among them. In the camp, they grew envious of Moses and of Aaron, who was consecrated to the Lord. The earth opened up and swallowed Dathan. It buried the company of Abiram. Fire blazed among their followers. A flame consumed the wicked. At Horeb, they made a calf and worshipped an idol cast from metal. They exchanged their glorious God for an image of a bull which eats grass. They forgot the God who saved them, who had done great things in Egypt, miracles in the land of Ham, and awesome deeds by the Red Sea. I don't want to repeat this morning's lesson, but I thought this would be a great psalm to remember before Thanksgiving. Not to give you a double portion, a double helping of Thanksgiving, but that's what we'll do. There is a pivotal problem in our lives, and there's also a pivotal answer that we can respond with in our lives. And both of these things really can mean a trajectory of our lives, the way we're going to think. When I say pivotal, these are important things. What we think about in certain situations and where we are in our lives really can mean the actions that we take. I had a book to read in college by one of my professors. He recommended it. It was called As a Man Thinketh in His Heart. And that was the title of the book. And the rest of the proverb is, so is he. As we think in our minds and what we're feeding our souls is the way we're going to act and is the way that we're going to behave. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. We are what we think. And so this choice of how we're going to think about life can really be life altering. It can make a big difference in the way we see life. And so first off, I want to look at a pivotal problem. An important problem that we might have in our lives. And it is important to see this in our lives if we have it, and that's ingratitude. Ingratitude, not being grateful, not being thankful. I pointed out when we read across it, Israel had witnessed so many things that God had done, and you notice that they had soon forgotten what the Lord had done. They soon forgot. Can you imagine having grown up in Egypt as an Israelite? They were there for 400 years, and all of a sudden, God sends you a shepherd. He sends you Moses, and you see these plagues that are being done on the nation of the Egyptians, and God takes you and moves you out, and you grab all your things, and you go, and you set out on this journey. And all of a sudden, you get to this big body of water, and you think, my goodness, we're not going to go any farther. We're going to die here. And then you see Moses lift up his staff, and the water before you of the Red Sea just parts, and it's dry like a desert on the ground. And so you walk across the Red Sea as on dry ground. And the Egyptians are chasing up to you. And so you get to the other side, and you see the enemies there crossing over, and then you see the waters cave in. And how the water just will baptize and consume all the enemies. I mean, the water is just flooding over them. And you see, wow, our God has protected us. Someone's with us. Someone's watching out for us. Can you imagine witnessing those plagues, the mighty power of God, the sea rushing apart, the sound of the waves as they pull apart, and the smell of the water as you go through, and it's amazing. It's miraculous. And we might think, well, if I had ever gone through that, I would never, ever forget that. That would be a once-in-a-lifetime moment. And I would certainly never forget the God who had done those things. Well, we'd be set for life, right? So, Israel wandered 40 years in the wilderness. And we say, we would never forget God. How could you after something like that, right? Well, they forgot Him. Do you want to guess how long it was before Israel started forgetting? Does anybody know? How long after the Red Sea do you think? 4 years? 40? Okay. Not quite that long. Go ahead. 3 years? What? Till they started forgetting. Well, I've got an answer. It was just a guess. I wondered too. It wasn't 10 years. It wasn't 5 years. It wasn't 1 year. I think Ryan's got the answer. It wasn't 6 months. It wasn't a month. It wasn't a week. It was 3 days. Exodus 15, Moses leads Israel from the Red Sea. They go to the desert of Shur, and for 3 days they traveled in the desert, and they had not yet found any water. They came to a place called Marah, and they could not drink the water there because the water was bitter. In fact, that's what Marah means. It means bitter. And so the people started complaining to Moses, saying, what are we going to drink? They're already starting to grumble and see the bad side of everything. They're already starting after 3 days to complain and starting to forget the God who's led them through the wilderness. And I think there's a challenge in there for us. Do you know how quickly we truly forget the good things that God has given us? Or do you see at least how easy it is for our minds to slip? Like, oh, well, I forgot the power of the Red Sea experience. That's why ingratitude is so important. That's why it's so pivotal to recognize this in our lives. Ignatius, who was a bishop of Antioch, he lived early in the 1st century. In fact, was born not long after the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ. He said this: ingratitude is the root. Ingratitude is the root of all sin. Anybody want to expound on that? Why would that be? Why would he say that that's the root of any kind of sin? Ingratitude.
Well, in some cases you would go do things your own way without consulting other authorities.
Yeah.
On how you should work through problems and such.
If we're going to live as a godly person, as a believer, it wouldn't make sense to go through life without consulting God through prayer. You remember when you were in school and the teachers would always put in the syllabus, do not plagiarize. If I catch you with 25% of your document plagiarized, I'm going to give you half off, which that's going a little easy. In college, you get a 0 for the first offense on the paper. On the second offense, you get expelled from the class. On the third offense, you can't come to school again. I mean, they take plagiarism very seriously. I think it's interesting. This is like a spiritual plagiarism. You take somebody else's homework and you give it to the teacher or give it to the schoolmaster as something you've done. I take credit for something that I didn't do. And is that sort of what we do when we're ungrateful? I act as if the blessings of life are all mine. They're my possessions. They're my family. This is my job. This is my money. And it's not anything God has provided. It's mine. And we treasure over it as if it's ours. If we're in good health, if we have meal plans on Thursday, and if we are blessed with people to spend Thursday with, then we are a blessed group of people. We are so blessed. And we may not even realize it. We are so rich compared to the rest of the world. We're richer than over 90% of the rest of the world if we have something to eat today. Yet we so often forget that because of sometimes because of our attitude. We talked about Romans this morning, the first part, and we certainly didn't go really deep into Romans, but I tried to give a little bit of an overview of what Paul was writing. And here's a little section of what Paul's written here in chapter 1, beginning in verse 21. Although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools. They exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man, and birds and animals and creeping things. Therefore, God gave them up in the lust of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves. I've read things where we go through the list of these as if, what are all the sins that these people committed? What is the first wrong that they did, that they're accused with? They didn't give glory to God, and they did not honor God as God or give him his rightful place. They did not give thanks to God. You ever notice that? The first wrong that they were described as having is not being thankful. They stopped being thankful to God who'd given them all these things. And if you look at God, God is not a bully. Brad talked last week about how God's not going to force your hand, even though he might want you to obey and do a certain thing. He's not going to force your hand and do something. If you desire this life, God will not pull you back by force. He's going to let you go that way, and he did not stop these people from going their way. In fact, 3 times in Romans chapter 1, Paul writes that God's given them up. He's given them over to a debased mind. He didn't want that. God did not want that for his people. He wanted better for the children of his creation. He loves them, and that's certainly not his plan for them, but he's not going to stop them if they want to go that way. Look how eerily similar. We'll go back to our original psalm, Psalm 106. They soon forgot his works. They did not wait for his counsel. They had a wanton craving in the wilderness and put God to the test in the desert. He gave them what they asked for, but sent a wasting disease among them. You see how eerily similar this is? It's like things are repeating themselves. Here are these Gentiles in Romans 1, and here's Israel in Psalm 106, and they're going a certain way. They're not being thankful to God. They're forgetting God, and God lets them forget. He lets them go their way. God will give us what we ask for. It's a pivotal thing in our lives if we have ingratitude. Do we recognize God in our life? Do we give thanks and praise to him, or do we forget about God and act like life is up to us? Like Brother Joe said, we don't need to consult the one who's guiding us. C.S. Lewis wrote a really great book. It's about the subject of heaven and hell. It's called The Great Divorce. And he said this. I thought this was very interesting. He wrote that there are only 2 types of people in the end. Those who say to God, thy will be done. And those to whom God says in the end, thy will be done. All that are in hell choose it. Without that self-choice, there could be no hell. No soul that seriously and constantly desires joy will ever miss it. Those who seek find it. Those who knocked will be opened. We will say to God, thy will, or God will say to us, thy will. That's what he's saying. God will honor our choice in the end, in the long run. And this week we are encouraged over and over to make a choice. Are we thankful? We can be so much like these people in Psalm 106, and we forget too soon. And it may be, I don't know if it's easier in our society or just as easy as it was back then, but I know we have life moving at the speed of light now. Our work goes with us wherever we want to go. If I want to take a Bible study home, I send it to Dropbox on my phone and I read it as I wind down at night. And I've got what I worked on here at the house or wherever I go. If I go to the doctor's office, work is always going with us on our tablets and smartphones. And what a blessing that is. But we finish one project, we move on to another, and our minds can get so bombarded that it's easy to forget the things that might be important to us. And so why do we struggle with ingratitude? Why is this something our people, the people of our country, struggle with? I've got 8 points. These aren't, I'll confess, these aren't original with me. I thought they were worth sharing, so the next 8 points I give to you free for nothing. But here's part of the problem that we suffer with in our country and people who forget God. One is the entitlement mentality. We feel like as a people that we are entitled to certain things. I'm entitled to certain things and a certain quality of life. I'm entitled to, at my age, have a big house like my folks had when I grew up. I'm entitled to be accepted into an Ivy League school. I don't have to study for it. I don't have to work hard for it. I don't have to be a well-rounded student. I don't want to get into a political debate, but we have government problems and issues because we wonder, what are people entitled to? What rights do we have? And we feel sometimes like the world owes us certain things. But it's that attitude of entitlement to feel like we deserve something that keeps us from being thankful to God when we receive those things. If I think I'm entitled to everything, when I receive that gift, when I have something, then it's all about me. It's all about me deserving it or me being owed that. I don't pray for it. I don't work for it. I certainly don't thank God for it. And entitlement can be a big barrier in us remembering God in our thanksgiving. A second thing is excessive speed. Excessive speed. We move through life sometimes a little too fast. Do we take the time to see what God has done? Do we slow down? And I'm not saying we don't continue to press forward, but do we slow down enough to see the beauty of God in our lives? I grew up in Anniston, Alabama, northeast Calhoun County. And I went to White Plains High School. And we were out in the middle of nowhere, and I was always having to get to town. I had to go to Oxford or Jacksonville to have any kind of fun. That's where the mall was. That's where, if you wanted to go out to eat, anywhere really that was a name brand place, you had to get out of town. We had a gas station and a little restaurant, and that was about it, and school. And if you didn't want to do any of those things, there was really nothing to do except go to a friend's house or just get out of town. I lived in the Appalachian foothills for 11 years when I went to school there. And I never noticed it. I mean, I would see it, but I didn't take it in. Wow, we'd drive on Highway 9, and there's this huge farm and this field, and there's a barn and this beautiful scene, and here's a great big mountain that's rising up with the fall colors, and it's just spectacular. And to think all I've got to do is go half a mile down the road and I have this. I didn't really notice that. So now when I drive through town and I go visit some old stops, I see this. And I'm thinking, wow, I lived here. This was my backyard. And I can't believe I lived there for so long and never really took it in. I never noticed it. Because there's something about when you see something every day, it gets ordinary. I love seeing Kelly every day. I love seeing my kids every day. If I miss them for a day, I guess that's different. But there are some things that if you see it or do it every day, it becomes routine and it loses its beauty. Do we take time in the ordinary and the busy and the mundane to thank God? To thank God for offering us certain opportunities, to take a look around and to see the gifts that God's given us. Because we have so many wonderful things around us that become too ordinary. Sometimes we move too fast without stopping to give thanks to God. A third thing is media overexposure. When we look at the news, a lot of times when I turn on the news, it's what's not right. That's a reminder in the world of what is not right with the world, because I don't often see the miracle surgery that somebody pulled through when they weren't expected to, the triumphs where somebody has overcome adversity. I don't know how often those really make the news. We can get overexposed to certain news channels and to a certain view that really it affects our thinking if we pour too much into it. I wonder if we could apply that to social media as well. To think about the social media world, Facebook and Twitter. Have you noticed, if you're on Facebook, the harshness that with which we speak to each other? We can be so brutal. I'm speaking of me and everybody who has that. We have the opportunity to be so brutal to somebody who's just behind the computer screen, and we're on the other side of the keyboard. And you may write something on my wall or post a comment, and I'll reply to it. And if you disagree with me, the world's caving in, okay? And I'm just talking about football. Gerald, it's Iron Bowl week. and you know, I got to stand strong for my team. And we, at times, can be overreactive and really want to be harsh. And I can expect that from maybe non-believers, people who don't know God, who don't consult God and His Word. But what is it when my response mirrors somebody who doesn't know God? When you can't tell the difference between the way I speak and the way somebody who doesn't know Christ would speak. It's not really displaying the love of Christ. I'm not saying don't take a stand for things that are important. I am saying do those things in a Christian way and pick our battles. Take a stand in a Christian way, a way that would be honoring and exalting to Jesus Christ. A fourth thing, American consumerism. Our economy of capitalism is driven on this idea of the need to be bigger and better and new and improved, to do away with the old-fashioned. In a way, in a big way, that's okay. That's how we in our country have been really successful. But what happens when that attitude gets in my mind? I get dissatisfied with the old when I don't have the latest and greatest. I've got something that's over here and I become unsatisfied with it. If I've got an iPhone 4, I need a 5. And if I've got an iPhone 5, I need a 6. And then a 7 and a 7 Plus. And we're on 10. I'm not getting on to anybody who's got the latest iPhone. So we might look at somebody who's got an iPhone 4 and say, wow, you've got a dinosaur. But do we realize the one who's got I've got a Samsung Galaxy 4. I don't know how many years old it is. I have it. I'm not into the latest phone, so maybe that's something I can get behind. But, you know, we have more technology on our cell phones than the Apollo 11 spacecraft did 40 or 50 years ago. I mean, it is amazing what we're able to do, and yet we so quickly forget that because we want something else to satisfy us. Something becomes a dinosaur after a couple of months. That kind of attitude keeps me, if I'm fueled by that, it makes me miserable or jealous. I'm jealous of my brother who's got the latest and greatest laptop. What is the answer? What is the answer to the ingratitude? Don't ever get hooked on ingratitude. Do you know the secret? Yeah.
But I just want to let somebody know I got one.
Yeah.
I don't know how to use it, but I got one.
You got it if you need it.
I bought, what's it called? I bought
A green egg.
She got them one day, and I bought my brother-in-law, but we got divorced over it. But I mean, so I went and bought a new. She said, "Ronnie, if you're gonna buy a tiller, you want to go?" Oh yeah, 7 out of 8. But anyway, long story short, I bought a tiller. She said, "Well, there's one thing about it. You got your tiller." I said, "Yeah, there's one thing about it. Anybody wants to borrow one, I got one."
So people are going.
It's white and it's still in the bacon. Still got tits on the tire too.
If you need a tiller, he's got one.
I got one. Be serious. I mean, I
Yeah. You're blessed. Yeah. Sure. If ingratitude is the problem, let's look at the solution, the practice. Thanksgiving. I know this is really spinning your head to think ingratitude and thanksgiving. But the Bible presents thanksgiving and gratefulness as a really big deal. This is an attitude, a pivotal attitude that we need to accept in our hearts and our lives. Paul to the Philippians in Philippians 4:6, don't be anxious about anything. In every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving. Our prayers ought to be those with thanksgiving, where we thank God for being in our lives and the things that we have, and to cure the anxious feelings that we have. With that kind of thankful attitude, present your request to God. Paul, writing to Timothy in his second letter, he talks about signs of apostasy, signs of the falling away. People will become lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, abusive, proud, disobedient to parents, and ungrateful, among other things. If we are ungrateful, maybe it's a sign that we're going the wrong way. Paul in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 18 says very simply, verse 17, pray without ceasing. Pray continually, pray constantly, and give thanks in every circumstance. Good, bad, sunny, cloudy, rainy. Give thanks in all circumstances. In the 106th Psalm, there were 4 things that Israel forgot. And so going off those, here's the other 4. What kind of things do we need to remember? What are the practices we need to put in our lives to be thankful? Look here at verse 7, the first part of verse 7. Our fathers, when they were in Egypt, did not consider your wondrous works. They did not consider your wonderful miracles. Remember the power of God. Remember who it is we have with us and the power that He has. Have you ever had an experience in your life where you look back and there's no other explanation except God did that? I don't know how in the world this happened. The best explanation, the only explanation that makes sense is God. You're trapped, you're broken, you're falling apart, and then something happened at just the right time, and there's no explanation. It's God. I love that Brian has shared with us the week that he's had, and he mentioned this about the nurse writing Deuteronomy 31 and verse 6. And how is that not a God thing? He says, I was up here a week ago teaching this verse, and this verse comes back through this nurse to remind me. God is ministering through His Word in every circumstance. I don't want to spend too much time on personal experiences, but we ought to remember those things, especially when we get down and we start to become ungrateful, because we get so cluttered in life that we really can forget those. Those things become like the Red Sea. How in the world could you put the Red Sea crossing behind you, yet some people would forget? And they would forget the power of God. Remember that feeling. How did it feel when God was on your side? The second half of that verse, verse 7. They did not remember the abundance of your steadfast love, but rebelled by the sea at the Red Sea. Remember God's kindness. Remember God's love. This word here, steadfast love, this is a big word in Hebrew, and I'm not a language scholar, and I wish I were sometimes, but this is the Hebrew word chesed, and it's translated loving kindness. And we put those two words together, and what does that mean? What does it mean to have loving kindness? If you check the translations that you might pick up off your shelf and read, it's kind of, I wonder if the translators really have understood the depth of this word, or if it really can't be fixed into just an English equivalent. New International says your many kindnesses. they didn't remember your many kindnesses. I've got this highlighted. New Living Translation, your many acts of kindness. English Standard, I like what ESV says, the abundance of your steadfast love. New American Standard Bible, your abundant kindnesses. The King James Version says your many acts of faithful love. Remember the old 1901 American Standard Version? That at one time was the most popular Bible translation among our brethren. Not so anymore. You can't. It's out of print. But they maybe have the best translation. They say, thy loving kindnesses. You think, what does this word loving kindness mean? It's God's kindness shown through his acts of love. I can be kind to you and not be loving when I do it. I can love you and not be kind when I do it. Does that make sense? I can do something that's loving and still somehow not be kind about it, about the way I do it. I can help you in showing you that, but yet not be loving. And to think God is both of those things at the same time. That's how God loves us. God was bound by oath to support Israel. We get over to Deuteronomy and Moses tells us in Deuteronomy that it was not because you were more numerous than any other people of the world. God chose you. He loved you, and he's bound an oath to you to protect you and to be in covenant with you. He gave Israel favor because he loved them, not because he had to. But then turn the quarter around. He did have to. He's bound by an oath. If he's God and if his oath and his word is true and his promise is right, he did have to. And even when they were unlovable. You have a headache yet? Maybe I'm over-explaining it. God's loving kindness is the way he loves us. And remember that. Can we take time to remember how God has been kind to us? How God has rescued us from disaster and sin? Don't spend too much time thinking about it, but if you think of the worst thing you've ever done or said, if I do, it embarrasses me. Really, and between me and God, and I think about it myself, and it really embarrasses me. And to think that God takes that and he doesn't remember it. He's forgiven me, and he has removed that sin from me as far as the east is from the west. How far east do you have to go west around the globe? He's taken it as far away from him as can be. Give thanks for that. That God remembers my sin and my iniquity no more. Third, let's look at verse 13. They soon forgot his works, his miracles. They did not wait for his counsel, but they had a wanton craving in the wilderness and put God to the test in the desert. Remember God's provision. Remember the things that God has gifted us with. Remember the things that God has given us. Can you think of a time when God provided for you? A few years ago, we had Kelly and I had Andy. We didn't have Zoe yet. We were in Winn-Dixie shopping, and I don't know how in the world this happened. The power connection or the system went out on the card readers. You know, now you've got the chip. Well, back then you didn't have the chip. The power went out on all the debit card, credit card readers across all the aisles. We were not doing well. We had about $150 in the bank. And so I had $120 of groceries that we were finishing checking out. It's like your total comes to about $120. So the thing was, well, you got to go to the ATM. So the line starts forming, and I'm second or third in line. I jump up pretty quick. The ATM denominations are 20, 40, 60, 80, up to 100. And then it goes from 100 to 200. I can't keep going on 20s. I have to get from 100 to 200. And I said, well, I can't get 100 and I can't get 200. I'll overdraft. I really can't do that. And I was really kind of struggling. I was trying to talk to Kelly through all these people and trying to call her. And what do I do? And the lady behind me, I don't know her name. I don't even remember what she looked like. But I remember she gave me money to buy our groceries. And it wasn't much. she didn't ask anything in return. And I said, ma'am, I will go back and I will, give me your address. I'll send you the cash back. And we just don't have it right now. And she didn't ask anything in return. She said, do something kind to somebody else in the future. And I remember that and how we were spared from any kind of embarrassment, any kind of overdrafting. And that's one of those times for us that I felt God was there and he was watching out for us. And somebody was there who was going to take care of us. God will provide in our times of need. I know you've got those stories. You guys have lived a lot longer than me. I know you guys have a lot of faith and you've seen how God has worked and moved in your life. Remember those things, especially this week, because it'll cause us to remember to be thankful to him. And when the light gets a little bit dimmer in times of life, fall back on those. Remember that God's been faithful before, that he's provided for us. The last thing, look at verse 21. They forgot God, their Savior, who had done great things in Egypt. They forgot God, the psalmist writes. We talked about God's power, God's provision, his providence, God's kindness. These are all things that God has done and God did. We don't just remember the things that God has done. We remember God. And we remember who he is. And we remember his presence. And we remember all the things that we can't fully explain. Because it's God is the one who gives us abundant grace. Who gives us a second chance. He's the giver of all the good things. And so let's prepare ourselves for Thanksgiving Day. This decision that we have to make can be pivotal to the way that we see life. The decision to remember to be thankful is so pivotal. Because if we think of ingratitude, it leads us to this awful attitude of being bitter, angry, to resent God, to resent others. To be ungrateful can lead us to be jealous, and all these ungodly attitudes and ungodly ways that we think. Or we can be thankful, like the Bible constantly tries to remind us to do and to be, and it leads to blessing. It leads to joy, to true contentment, being happy with the things that we have. It leads us to a peace with God that passes all understanding. And so I'll close with this. Psalm 106, verse 1. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever. Be thankful for never having to be alone in life. We always have a partner, and more than a partner, a shepherd and a guide and a spirit that dwells in us. Be thankful for the hope of eternal life. That the bad news that we do see is not the end. This is not our final home. Our home is with him. Our citizenship is with him for eternity. Give thanks for the gift of his Son to wash away our sins, to give us a new life and a new hope. If we can help you, if you need to be refreshed and to be thankful once again, we ask you to come while we stand and sing. Shall be ours unto the end. Without him life would be how dark, how drear. But with him morning breaks and heaven is near.
If there's anyone here that has not had the opportunity of partaking of the Lord's Supper, we have that to offer to you. If you will come forward, you will be served. Holy Father, we thank you for this day you give us. We thank you for your many blessings. And Father, we ask that this time that you will bless this bread, that we're taking on this bread, remembering that body, your Son's body that was given for us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. We take this cup of representation of that blood that was shed for our sins. Holy Father, again, we thank you. Thank you for the sacrifice, the shedding of his blood that cleanses us. And as we partake of this fruit of wine, Father, we ask you to bless it, that we'll always remember your mighty and awesome deeds. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. You have a contribution to make today. Let's do this. Try it out here. Thank you for being here this evening. Thank you, Aaron, for that message. And hopefully we'll see you tomorrow evening for the Monday night for the Master. Are there any announcements that should be made before we dismiss? Let's pray. Holy Father, again, we thank you for this day you've given us. And as we depart from here, Father, we ask your presence in our lives and the willingness to allow you to work in our lives, Father. And we can do what is right and good in your sight. And maybe some soul will come to know you. And we thank you, Father. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.